In our headlines on this Tuesday afternoon, September 26th, here in South Korea. Early celebrations to mark the country's 75th Armed Forces Day are underway, with President Yoon Suk-yeol warning Pyongyang against the use of nuclear weapons, as Seoul is poised to launch a massive military parade for the first time in 10 years. And also in capital Seoul, senior diplomats from South Korea, Japan and China are addressing prospects of a resumption in Trilateral Summit talks, with officials here seeking for the summit to take place within this year. Meanwhile, at the Asian Games over in Hangzhou, Team Korea garners a total of 10 gold medals to maintain its second place standing on the medal table behind the host, China. North Korea's use of nuclear weapons will lead to its demise amid an overwhelming response from the South Korea-US alliance. Now, this pledge by President Yoon Suk-yeol was made earlier on this Tuesday to mark the country's 75th Armed Forces Day this coming Sunday, that is October 1st. The celebration this year includes the first massive military parade in a decade and takes place early as Korea's Chuseok holiday begins on Thursday for an extended holiday until early next week. Highlighting yet again the existential threat of North Korea's nuclear weapons ambitions to South Korea and to the broader stability of world peace, President Yoon pledged swift measures against any act of provocation by Pyongyang. He also went on to assert that nuclear weapons will fail to guarantee North Korea's security. And as mentioned earlier, a massive military parade has been scheduled for the first time in 10 years to commemorate the country's 75th Armed Forces Day. According to Seoul's Defense Ministry, the parade will take place downtown Seoul along Sejongdae starting at 4 p.m. Officials add this year's show of strength will be larger in scale and more advanced in technology compared to that held in the year 2013. South Korea's military parades to mark Armed Forces Day take place every 5 years, but back in 2018, the event was downsized amid efforts to advance ties with North Korea. Over in the U.S., Washington's top diplomat has applauded the advances in the alliance between South Korea and the U.S. over the past 70 years, adding that their initial interest in security has thus expanded into a partnership in, quote, all aspects. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has once again highlighted the Ironclad alliance between South Korea and the U.S. Speaking during the 8th Annual South Korea-U.S. Strategic Forum, co-hosted by the Center for Strategic and International Studies and the Korea Foundation on Monday in Washington, Blinken analyzed that the allies have been strengthening all aspects of their partnership, including security, trade, and economic dimensions. The top U.S. diplomat also noted that South Korea and the U.S. will soon celebrate 70 years since the signing of a mutual defense treaty, and that such cooperation has helped the alliance to grow even more in the spirit of 같이 갑시다, or let's go together.
Ever since, our alliance has been fortified by our enduring cooperation, by the shared spirit of 같이 갑시다. 70 years of relationship that has grown from a key security alliance into a vital global partnership.
He also took time to mention the enhanced trilateral cooperation with Japan, including the Camp David summit between the leaders of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan. Meanwhile, Blinken also discussed the threats posed by a potential North Korea-Russia military cooperation. He stressed that North Korea's threats to broader security were demonstrated clearly by Kim Jong-un's visit to Russia this month. He added that Pyongyang is looking to strengthen and advance its own missile programs by working hand-in-hand with Russia and threatening global peace and security. Monday's forum was held to discuss the 70th anniversary of the signing of the Mutual Defense Treaty between South Korea and the United States on October 1st and the alliance's future over the next 7 decades. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol and First Lady Kim Gun-hee will make a state visit to the UK in November upon the invitation of King Charles III. Now, this visit marks the 140th anniversary of diplomatic ties between Korea and the UK and will be President Yoon's first trip there since the King's coronation. His previous visit to London took place last September for the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. Senior diplomats from South Korea, Japan and China sat down here in Seoul on this Tuesday to address the resumption of Trilateral Summit talks. Deputy Foreign Minister Jongun met with Tokyo's Senior Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs, Takehiro Funakoshi, and Beijing's Assistant Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yoon. Seoul is hoping to host a three-way summit within this year. The last such summit took place in December 2019 over in Beijing. Also, on the diplomatic front, Moscow's top diplomat is poised to visit Pyongyang in October amid prospects of yet another summit between Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin, this time in North Korea. Our Min-jung reports.
Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has announced plans to visit North Korea next month. Speaking to reporters after delivering a speech at the UN General Assembly on Saturday, Lavrov said his visit comes following the recent summit between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and Russian President Vladimir Putin. This will mark Lavrov's first visit to North Korea in over 5 years.
In accordance with the agreements reached between Kim Jong-un and Putin, we will carry out negotiations in Pyongyang, which may indeed take place next month.
Lavrov is likely to discuss Putin's anticipated visit to Pyongyang during the talks with his North Korean counterparts. During the summit between the two leaders earlier this month, Putin accepted Kim's invitation to visit North Korea.
Kim Jong-un invited Putin to visit North Korea. Putin gratefully accepted this invitation. All further coordination will continue through diplomatic channels.
Russia's closer relations with North Korea coincide with its growing intimacy with China. Last week, Putin accepted an invitation to China for October to meet with his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping. One expert hinted at a stronger trilateral cooperation between Pyongyang, Beijing, and Moscow.
North Korea and Russia are likely to get closer with strengthening North Korea-Russia relations. It seems relatively unlikely that China will break away from the trilateral alliance.
Pundits are also anticipating a possible trilateral summit between the three following Putin's visit to China and North Korea. Min-jung, Arirang News.
And starting this past Monday across the border, North Korea opened its doors to foreign travelers, but they are required to undergo 2 days of quarantine upon arrival. Our Shin Ha-young has more.
North Korea's borders are now fully reopened, some 3 years and 8 months since the regime was completely sealed off due to the COVID-19 outbreak. According to Chinese state media outlet CCTV, starting Monday, North Korea has started allowing entry for foreigners. Without specifying the source of the announcement, CCTV reported that authorities in Pyongyang lifted the border closure with the requirement of a 2-day quarantine period upon arrival. The regime has shown movement towards opening its borders for the past few months. In July, it allowed the entry of delegations from China and Russia and also allowed its citizens living abroad to return home last month in an easing of antivirus measures and border controls. Plans to reopen were also evident in terms of policymaking. Last month, North Korea adopted a new law to revitalize its tourism industry. It addresses issues including expanding both domestic and international tourism and ensuring convenience for tourists. Also, earlier this month, North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un traveled to Russia for a summit with President Vladimir Putin, and North Korean athletes who are participating at the Hangzhou Asian Games have traveled to China. Regarding the reopening of North Korea's borders, during its briefing on Monday, the U.S. Department of State reaffirmed its commitment to diplomacy with the regime, stating that the Biden administration has consistently welcomed and been open to dialogue with North Korea, which Pyongyang has rejected. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Team Korea is holding on to its second place on the medal table at the Asian Games. Our Matthew Ashley has the latest.
In fencing, Oh Sang-uk won the gold in the men's individual sabre event in an all-Korean final. Oh's victory on Monday broke a winning streak held by opponent and compatriot Gu Bon-gil. Gu had previously won gold in the men's individual events in 3 straight Asiads and beat Oh in the 2018 final. This time, though, Oh Sang-uk won 15-7 for his first Asian Games title. South Korea now has 2 gold medals in the discipline, both from all-Korean finals in the men's and women's division. Oh and Gu are set to team up for the men's team sabre event, hoping for a third consecutive gold. Moving on to swimming, where South Korea's men's relay team on Monday broke the Asian record to win gold in the 4x200-meter freestyle. Swimmers Yang Jae-hoon and Lee Ho-jun, Kim Woo-min and Hwang Son-woo set a new best for the continent at 7 minutes and 1.73 seconds. China took silver and Japan bronze. Team Korea's time beats a 14-year-old record set by Japan and is South Korea's first gold medal in the discipline. Meanwhile, swimmer Ji Yu-chan also secured a gold in the men's 50-meter freestyle on the same day. It's the 21-year-old's first Korea Asiad gold, with an Asian Games record time of 21.72 seconds. In table tennis, South Korea will face China in the men's table tennis team final this evening. South Korea on Monday managed to beat Iran 3-0 in the semi-finals. It's the South Korean men's 10th consecutive final of the Asiad event. But South Korea hasn't won gold since 1990. The men's final is set to take place on Tuesday at 8 p.m. Korea time. Meanwhile, South Korea's women's team had to settle for bronze after losing 3-1 against Japan in the semi-finals. And finally, in judo, South Korea's Lee Jun-hwan secured second place on the podium in the men's under 81 kilogram event in his Asiad debut. In a closely fought match-up, the 21-year-old narrowly missed out on the gold to Tajikistan's Somon Makhmabedkov. Makhmabedkov's win came around 2 minutes into the match after he scored a critical point against Lee using a hip sweep counter, or harai goshi geshi. The move left Lee struggling to make a counterattack before his time ran out. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
At the White House this past Monday, U.S. President Joe Biden played host to leaders from the 18-member Pacific Island Forum as Washington seeks to strengthen its engagement with the region amid concerns over Beijing's ambitions there. Our Yoon reports.
The White House summit hosted by President Joe Biden, where he met with Pacific Island leaders on Monday, was the second meeting of its kind in just over a year. The forum is seen as a part of a larger Biden administration effort to deepen ties with the region, where officials say Beijing is hopeful of protecting military power. Before welcoming the 18 leaders and representatives, Biden announced U.S. diplomatic recognition of 2 more Pacific Island nations, the Cook Islands and Niue, highlighting that recognizing them as sovereign and independent states would enable expansion for a stronger partnership. During the welcoming ceremony, Biden emphasized that the U.S. is committed to ensuring a free, open, prosperous, and secure Indo-Pacific region. He also pledged to work with U.S. Congress to provide $200 million more in funding for the region. The funds would be used for projects aimed at resolving issues including climate change, economic growth, public health, and countering illegal fishing. However, Washington appears to have made no progress over offers of substantial infrastructure funding to the Solomon Islands, whose prime minister has deepened ties with China and did not attend the summit. Also absent was the newly appointed Prime Minister of Vanuatu, who took power just 2 weeks ago following a no-confidence vote against his predecessor for actions including signing a security pact with U.S. ally Australia. China signed a policing agreement with Vanuatu just last month. Speaking at the summit, President Biden invoked America's World War II campaign against Japan in the region and, without naming China, implied that a battle of another kind was now underway. He added that a great deal of history will be written across the Pacific over the coming years, with partnership key to writing that history together. Yoon, Arirang News.
Staying on the international front, one of the most powerful ground weapons in U.S. arsenal, the Abrams tanks, have arrived in Ukraine. Accordingly, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in a statement released back on Monday, thanked Washington for abiding by its pledges as Kyiv seeks to reinforce its brigades. This latest arrival of tanks marks the first such batch of the 31 tanks that the U.S. earlier promised to provide. The exact number of the tanks delivered thus far has yet to be disclosed. During summit talks between Presidents Zelensky and Biden at the White House last week, the U.S. leader announced a $325 million fresh military package for Ukraine. In local politics, main opposition Democratic leader Lee Myung is in court for a substantive review of his arrest warrant amid corruption charges. He appeared at the Seoul Central District Court with a cane earlier on this Tuesday, having recently ended a 24-day hunger strike against government policies. During today's review in court, prosecutors are expected to call for his detainment, alleging the possibility of his tampering with evidence. Now, Lee's fate will be announced earlier, either this evening or early tomorrow morning. This latest event follows the recent parliamentary approval of a government motion calling for his arrest. In other news, urban farming appears to be gaining a firm foothold here in the country, with the latest statistics showing over 2 million such farmers fueling prospects of greater economic value. Our Jongun has details.
This is a pet plant clinic where horticulture experts are the doctors. After diagnosing that the plant's roots are in bad shape, the experts repot the plants and recommend nutrients for them. The pet plant clinic is equipped with treatment rooms and wards and even offers intensive treatment for up to 3 months in serious cases.
Most of the time, the problem is related to watering or lighting, so we diagnose the issue and prescribe a solution so owners can grow the plants properly.
Biowalls, also known as botanical air purifiers, have gained popularity here. Installation inquiries have been steady, mainly from schools and offices, as they are known to reduce fine dust and alleviate sick building syndrome. The Rural Development Administration first developed biowalls in South Korea in 2013 and has since transferred technology 19 times to private companies.
Looking from the perspective of people who spend over 90% of their time indoors, there's a high level of satisfaction from creating such spaces in terms of reducing fine dust.
As of last year, there were 1.96 million urban farmers who cultivated gardens and green spaces. The area of urban gardens reached 1,052 hectares. When the value of urban agriculture was converted into money, the analysis results show that it was worth more than 5 trillion won, or roughly $3.7 billion US. Urban agriculture's economic value, such as in purchasing agricultural supplies and creating jobs, exceeded 3 trillion won, or about $2.2 billion US. The social value, which includes physical activity and emotional well-being, reached 1.3 trillion won, or $981 million US, while the environmental value, such as in carbon reduction or urban greening, was worth 700 billion won, or $528 million US.
This is significant as we quantified how effective urban agriculture is, both socially and environmentally, beyond simply thinking it would be good.
As urban farming is gaining attention as an industry, the Rural Development Administration plans to use these analysis results as the basis for urban farming policy formulation for the mutual development of urban and rural areas. Jongun, Arirang News.
Beef is aged over time to allow for additional tenderness and flavor. Well, researchers here are using radio waves to accelerate this process. Our An Sung-jin explains.
This unit that looks like a regular commercial refrigerator is all wired up. It's been installed to trial the latest radio wave meat aging technology. The facility itself is a low-temperature warehouse in a meat processing and distributing company. Normally, in the process of aging meat, 3 factors are critical: enzymes, temperature, and time. However, the latest technology developed by the Rural Development Administration that uses radio waves has changed the scene. Through rods, radio waves quickly bring the temperature of the meat to the 20 to 40 degrees Celsius range, where the enzyme reaction is most active. Meanwhile, the air inside the refrigerator reaches sub-zero temperatures, which suppresses the growth of microorganisms and allows the surface of the meat to dry quickly. This technology has significantly reduced the duration of the aging process, which normally takes between 2 to 4 weeks to a mere 48 hours.
It normally takes 30 to 40, even up to 60 days in order to get this unique cheesy flavor. But using radio waves, it's possible in 1 day. This changes economic feasibility.
Radio wave-aged meat turned out to be 25% more tender than raw meat, and through the process, the amount of free amino acids, which gives the meat the sweet and rich flavor, increased 1.5 times. On the business front, yield losses decreased by 15 to 20% more than for regular dry-aged meat, and there was no wasting of the meat's surface layer that hardens in the dry aging process.
Because the meat is aged in a very short period, it can maintain high yields and quickly treat raw meat for commercialization. So I think it's a better option for distributors.
The Rural Development Administration hopes to revitalize the aged meat industry and further, in partnership with the home appliance company, plans to introduce this new radio wave meat aging technology for commercial use in households. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Wet weather continues in most parts of Korea. Central regions can expect to see showers letting up from the west in the late afternoon. Then it will rain again tomorrow. East Coast regions will see 20 to 70 millimeters of showers, and the rest of the country can expect 5 to 40 millimeters of on and off rain through Wednesday. Now, today's rain brought cooler air to the country, and those in central areas are having a big drop in highs this afternoon. Hovering below 25 degrees, Seoul at 22, Chuncheon at just 21 degrees. But Gwangju and Busan are warmer at 26 degrees Celsius. Meanwhile, Jeju Island is having a rain-free day under cloudier skies with a high of 29. Much improved weather conditions are in the forecast for the 6th-day Chuseok holiday under sunny skies, but with chillier air. So please have a warmer jacket with you when traveling during the break. And we are welcoming October with morning temperatures in the low teens. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions. Right, that ends Tuesday's edition of the Daily Report. Coming up after this break is yet another session of our panel discussion. Do stay with us.
Contour the world, simply contour. India, the United Kingdom, New Zealand. Woo!
I'm excited. You excited?
Of course.
Yeah.
Music, start.
The taste of Namdo, bridging the world. Unfolding in the romantic city of Yosu, Jeonnam. The 29th Namdo Food Festival is going to be held from October 6th to October 8th. A place where flavors transform into art and tastes become cherished memories. Relish the autumnal charm of Namdo, which nourishes both the soul and the senses in the vibrant city of Yosu, synonymous with romance and vitality. Feel and taste the origin of K-food to the distinguished 29th Namdo Food Festival. We warmly invite you all.
Welcome. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라 감당할 수 있겠니? Welcome. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라 감당할 수 있겠니? 한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라 감당할 수 있겠니?
Tentative groundwork for trilateral talks among the heads of South Korea, China and Japan are reportedly being laid out to revive regional cooperation on issues of broader interest. So what issues look to top these talks should they take place? Will such a summit seek to bridge the gap over differences or broaden their divide? And what are the broader implications of a possible visit to Pyongyang by Russia's Vladimir Putin? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. It's that time of the week, yet again, during which we touch upon stories here in this part of the world that are making headlines elsewhere as well. And for more on this, I have Nicholas Roca live on the line. Nicholas, it's good to have you on.
Hello, Sunny. Good to be here.
I also have Nicholas Smith with us. Nicola, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Right, Nicola, let's start with you. Let's begin with news about President Yoon Suk-yeol's planned state visit to the UK in November. What do we know thus far?
Well, the news just broke today. It was released simultaneously by the Presidential Office and also by Buckingham Palace in the UK. So what we know is that, first of all, this is the 140th anniversary of bilateral ties between the UK and Korea, so it's a very significant year. And this is the first state visit that King Charles will have hosted since his coronation in May, and it will be a very prestigious event. A state visit is the highest possible visit that you can have by a foreign leader, so that will mean there will be lots of pomp and ceremony. We don't have the full details yet, but what we can expect are things like an honour guard to greet President Yoon and the First Lady, and also a carriage ceremony, carriage procession to Buckingham Palace for a state dinner, where we would normally see the King toast his guest and give a speech, and then we would expect that President Yoon would also give a toast and a speech. And I'm sure we'll see President Yoon meeting with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and other members of the cabinet, and also with the Lord Mayor of London and industry leaders for discussions away from the more ceremonial aspects of the trip.
Right, indeed. And Nicholas, staying with summits, there's been quite a bit of coverage about prospects of a trilateral summit involving South Korea, Japan and China here in Seoul. Now, I believe high-level efforts to this end are taking place as we speak. Could you tell us a bit more?
Yes, there's been trilateral talks taking place in Seoul since Mondays between deputy foreign ministers of the three countries. The aim globally seems to be to make the talks, the annual trilateral talks that have been in place with the between the three countries since 2008, to make them happen again. They've been halted since 2019 because of frictions between Seoul and Tokyo, and of course because of the COVID pandemic. We've seen Foreign Minister Park Jin meet with the foreign assistant foreign ministers of China and Japan yesterday. Last weekend, there has been high-level talks also between Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Han Duck-soo during the Hangzhou Asian Game, and in which Xi Jinping said he would seriously consider visiting Korea, which would be quite a significant move. So I think we could see all those diplomatic efforts as a way to try and reduce the tension that has been rising for the last few months, especially between South Korea and China. Since President Yoon notably arrived to power, he had a very U.S. lenient foreign policy, which of course Beijing doesn't appreciate that much. And there's been a few points of a few issues between the countries. Of course, the chip issue, then the Chinese state media criticism of the renewed ties between Seoul and Tokyo, the comments of President Yoon on the Taiwan Strait, mentioning it as an international security issue, of course, made a lot of noise in Beijing as China sees it as a national issue. And lastly, the comments of the Chinese ambassadors to South Korea that made a pretty ambiguous statement saying that those who would bet on China will regret their decision, in a meeting with Lee Jae-myung, of course, which created tensions inside the South Korean government. But things seem to be easing up. There's been the reinstatement of the Group 2 of Chinese tourists in South Korea, a program of the South Korean government to welcome the Chinese tourists. Now we're seeing those diplomatic efforts. So Beijing seems to be willing to talk now that Tokyo, Seoul, and Washington are seeing eye to eye.
Right, indeed. And against the background that Nicholas has drawn for us, Nicola, what do you suppose should top these talks, should they take place?
I think there's a different question as to what should top the talks and what actually will top the talks. And I agree with Nicola that I think it's going to be more about resetting relations and putting relations back on track after months of tensions and criticism from Beijing over the deepening ties between Tokyo and Seoul, and also their trilateral relationship and alliance with the US since the Camp David summit. No doubt there will be reassurances from President Yoon, Prime Minister Kishida, to Xi Jinping that China has no need to worry about their relationship with the United States, that they have an entirely separate relationship with China. They'll be seeking to reassure him that is strong. President Xi has made his own overtures towards Korea, especially, where he has said that he wants to meet halfway with Korea and that he wants to improve supply chain integration and emphasize their inseparable economic partnership. So it's likely that trade and the economy will be very high on the agenda. That's important for all three nations. And also, we would expect that President Yoon will raise China's relationship with North Korea. And as he said in the past, that he would expect China to use its influence over Kim Jong-un to try to get him to curb his nuclear ambitions. So that will likely also be a priority, especially for South Korea. And for Japan, I'm sure that Prime Minister Kishida will want to raise China's objections to the Fukushima wastewater release, which has caused a lot of tension between the two countries and significant economic problems as well, or potential economic problems for Tokyo. So it's good to have these constructive, this constructive dialogue rather than tensions, and ensure that diplomacy will really be at the top of the agenda.
Right, of course it will, right. Nicholas, do you believe the planned trilateral interaction will serve to perhaps ease geopolitical tensions, or will they simply reaffirm the current divide over security concerns among the three nations?
Well, I think it's kind of hard to talk, but it's hard to make assessment on the future. I think, as Nicholas said, there could be some room for improvement, especially on trade, on economic ties. I mean, on for instance, the semiconductors industry, the position of the South Korean companies are not the easiest, between the advantage of the Inflation Reduction Act in Washington, but also the economic investment it already made in mainland China. There's a difficult situation, but I think there will also be some points of disagreement that I don't see going anywhere. I mean, as long as South Korea, the leaders in South Korea, Japan, and the United States stay the same, I think the trilateral cooperation we've been seeing is going to pursue on the Taiwan Straits. It's hard to see the countries fully agree, but maybe on the southern, we could see the South Korean President Yoon go back to maybe a softer line than what he previously said, just staying at the level of maintaining the status quo and no change in the status quo in any non-peaceful way. And then on North Korea, I mean, it's hard to imagine South Korea and Japan agree on Beijing. With Beijing on that subject, even though Beijing will always be seen as a country that has some kind of leverage on Pyongyang, and that will try to keep good ties with them. What we can note is that, I mean, China didn't send the most important officials to North Korea recently, especially if we compare them to those that were sent by Russia. So we don't really know what are the ambitions of China towards North Korea recently, even though we can suspect that I mean, the economic ties that have been bounding the two countries are gonna pursue. But I mean, the last two delegations were headed by Lee Hong-jong, Liu Guozhong, that are members of the Politburo, but that are not the highest ranked members. Whereas Russia sent, for instance, Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, Sergei Lavrov, Foreign Minister, is also expected, as well as maybe in the near future Vladimir Putin. And it seems that it's a proof of maybe Russia willing to go a bit more forward in the relationship with North Korea than what China is probably ready to do.
Right. Nicholas, staying with what Nicholas has just touched upon, what would be the broader implications of a second summit between Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin?
Well, if President Putin does go to Pyongyang, then this will again reinforce that he's trying to court Kim Jong-un as a strategic partner to counter US interests, and as well as pursuing a potential arms deal, which Washington has been warning about. We've already seen President Putin roll out the red carpet for Kim Jong-un in Russia, and we've seen the visit of the defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, to Pyongyang. And we're also expecting the Russian foreign minister to be going to Pyongyang. So what we're seeing really is a deepening alliance of convenience between now two pariah states who are increasingly viewing their relationship as an opportunity to upset Washington's policies, not only in Ukraine, but also in the Indo-Pacific. And if President Putin does go, then it will also show that he's really decided to double down on reversing what was once a constructive role that Russia was playing in trying to rein in Kim Jong-un's nuclear weapons program. He's showing that he's playing now more of an enabling role, and it could also, work to his advantage to a certain extent in the way that he appears to be pursuing Pyongyang to help restore his own depleted stocks of anti-tank missiles, artillery shells, which he needs for the war in Ukraine, even though both countries have denied that this arms deal is on the table. And ultimately, it shows that that President Putin is really running out of foreign friends as well, if he's placing so much importance on this relationship with Kim Jong-un.
Right. And amid concerns of potential cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang, Nicholas, Seoul, for its part, has called on Moscow to be more transparent in its dealings with Pyongyang. That being said, what are the chances of Pyongyang and Moscow confirming their cooperation on the weapons front, do you think?
Well, I mean, I think it's unlikely, or at least I could say is that I don't see the interest for Moscow. It will be a huge shift for Russia, which would mean ultimately that the United Nations security sanctions are just nothing anymore, and they openly don't respect it. We know we've been assuming, and there's been signs, multiple signs that the sanctions are not respected. But I mean, the saying it out loud in a way, making it officials, I don't really see the benefits for Moscow. On North Korean side, of course, it would show a strong alliance. It would reinforce Pyongyang diplomatically. But on the Russian side, I don't see what could be the interest of doing it so openly. I think the other question is what kind of weapon cooperation could they confirm? Russia is, as Nicola mentioned, definitely interested in North Korean weapon, probably also in North Korean workers. But it kind of depends if North Korea is able to provide some munitions, some shells in a really large scales. There has been assumptions by the Ukrainian forces that they intercepted some shells, some munitions coming from North Korea, but in small quantity. If it stays on this, relatively small level, I don't see the need for Moscow to publicize it. It's the same the other way around with the potential technology transfers from Russia to North Korea. I think there's low benefits for Moscow to do so, or to even openly do so, except if it wants to definitely break ties also with Seoul. One of the possibility, one of the theory around this summit is that this trip was a form of warning to South Korea, showing that Russia has the ability to help North Koreans' weapon of mass destruction program, North Korea aviation, North Korea's marine, North Korea's space program, and saying in a way to Seoul that if South Korea decides to go forward and change its policy and send weapons, munitions directly to Ukraine, well, Russia is ready to do the same with North Korea. So maybe that's more the kind of reading into that relationship that I would subscribe to.
Right. So maybe the summit itself was more symbolic in nature then. Right, Nicola, beyond geopolitical concerns, the BBC recently covered Korea's efforts to better protect the rights of teachers within schools, I believe. Could you tell us a bit more about this particular coverage?
Sure. So South Korea has just passed the Teachers' Rights Restoration Bill, which aims to give teachers more rights in the classroom. And just to recap, the protests began after the very tragic suicide of a young teacher who reportedly was under a lot of pressure at work. And teachers came out in solidarity over that. And also just to highlight the pressures that they faced. They said they wanted more protection against pushy parents, and also just better rights to help discipline in the classroom. They said that they were not being given the powers that they needed just to enforce regular discipline in the classroom. And at the crux of the matter was the Child Welfare Act, and a very vague clause in that act that could hold teachers accountable for child abuse over what they said was basic disciplinary measures. And so they were asking for that to be changed. And the government has listened to what they were saying and has made some revisions. So under the new law, teachers will be immediately not be immediately removed from the classroom following reports of child abuse. They will also be offered financial support for any legal proceedings, and head teachers are also now obligated to offer more support for their teachers. So this has been welcomed by many teachers and unions. There are some people or some teachers who are saying that it doesn't go far enough, that it should never be the case that if you're enforcing a regular disciplinary action that you could face charges of or accusations of child abuse. And it is, however, a very significant step towards what the teachers have been calling for. And it may take some time for many of the issues to be sorted out. The Telegraph also interviewed several teachers who told us about how much pressure they were under emotionally, that they didn't feel that they had a voice, that they were not being given enough support. And this will hopefully help to improve conditions for them.
Right, hopefully. And Nicholas, what do you suppose can be done to better protect the rights of teachers as well as the students themselves within the learning environment, do you think?
Well, I think the bill the teachers' right restoration bill that Nicola explained briefly is going in the right direction. At least it is what the teachers have been overwhelmingly asking for. What kind of shocked me when I went to the protest and I discussed with the teachers is that they had so many stories of parents' harassments and parents' abuse, almost all of them. I think even though this law is going in the right direction, probably there must be some thought put into possible maybe change of the education ecosystem and the way it actually works, because this behavior of the parents shows in a way that the stakes are so high against education, as for the students as well as for the parents, which creates a really high amount of pressure, and that in the end, make the teachers the victim of those huge stakes. I mean, it is not a mystery that Hagwon private education is very important in Korea, which could partly create a feeling where teachers are in a position where they owe the parents a service, even though we're talking, of course, of a movement by public teachers, but the private educations being so powerful and so present could be changing the mentalities. There's been various studies showing that Korea is amongst one of the most expensive countries to raise kids, vastly because of the investment in education. So this important investment make the education and the relationship between the child and the teacher so important that it kind of is the roots or the cause of the abuse from the parents and this whole situation. Probably the fact that there's more and more single child families in Korea is also making this phenomenon even worse, because there's only one child in a way that could succeed academically. So probably there should be questions asked and thoughts about reforms of the system, probably where private education could take a little bit less of a place, or maybe a bit less elitist, just to probably relieve some of the burden and the tensions that is hurting the teachers, the kids, and the parents.
Right. Well, the dialogue has begun and hopefully will come to a more productive way to ensure education within schools here in the country. Nicola, on a light note now, we are looking ahead to a 6-day holiday starting this coming Thursday to mark Chuseok as well as the National Foundation Day. That being said, Nicola, what do you suggest as some potential fun activities for foreigners here in the country to mark this holiday?
Well, I'm possibly not the best person to ask because I've only lived here for a year. But some of the things that I love doing personally are hikes around the city. Inwangsan is a favorite of mine. Also, Namsan, if you want an easier stroll, or Bukhansan National Park is beautiful. It's going to be sunny weather, so I would definitely suggest getting out to enjoy that. Take your sunscreen, but enjoy enjoy that beautiful weather and hopefully clear views of Seoul. You could also hire a bike and ride along the Han River. You could go all the way out to the coast if you're feeling really ambitious. And I also love going to Gwangjang Market, where there's just so much bustle and so many things to see and lots of local foods to try. Another of my favorite activities is just wandering around areas like Seongsu or Hongdae or Itaewon, where I live, and just going into the back streets and just finding new little restaurants and bars, and there's so much to offer in these little back streets that they're quite hidden away. And then if you want to get out of Seoul, then Busan is less than 3 hours away by train, and you could spend some time on the lovely Hyundai beach and explore the city. So those would be my top recommendations.
Right, and I have to admit, I love the hustle and bustle of traditional open markets here in the country as well. Nicholas, what are your suggestions for this Chuseok to a foreign community here?
I think the best would be to be invited by a Korean family to really experience the spirit of the holiday, but it seems like a pretty ambitious goal, and I have not succeeded personally since I've been here. I think, as Nicholas mentioned, it's a great time to go hiking, to go to Bukhansan, do the hikes you don't have the time to do when it's not the holidays. There's also, I mean, I don't want to entice anybody to take the cars, but there will be no toll fees from Thursday to October 1. So if you have a car and you are not scared of very heavy traffic, probably it's a good time to go discover some of the beautiful landscape this country has to offer. It's a good time to eat all the traditional food, the chons, the songpyeon, the toks, the japchae, where all the I think it's a good time to eat, go out of Seoul if you've got the opportunity. And just maybe enjoy the city, which is unusually calm at this time of year.
Right, capital Seoul will be rather calm then. All right, Nicola, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts today. And Nicola, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, well, that brings us to the end of Tuesday's edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching. Do join us again, same time tomorrow.